throw bowl. We're starting with 2 pounds of wedge clay. I've got my wooden knife tool, a needle tool, a sponge, a wire tool, and I've got a couple of different round tools, ribs. So any round rib will do. These are made to have different flexibilities, different stiffnesses, so these can be nice for inside of bowls. And I also have my trusty hotel key card, which is one of my favorites. So I'm starting with that. I've got to find my, right there. I've got my 2 pounds of clay. I'm going to start my wheel. I moved my foot pedal the other day. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna start my wheel up. There we go. I'm gonna center in the same way that I've been centering everything else. So I've got my clay wet, I've got my hands wet. I'm gonna start by pushing this clay down and sealing it right onto the wheel head. Okay. And then I'm gonna do that same process of coning. Again, I'm using the inside of my hands. My wrists are straight, so I'm not back here. I'm able to use the strength of my whole upper body. My elbows are tucked in at my side. Coning it up, and then I'm gonna cone that directly back down. Clean up that wheel head a little bit. Okay. Still a little bit off center, so I'll just cone it up one more time. So I'm giving it some pretty strong compression to bring it in and slowly bringing my hands up. And then I can compress this right back down. Again, I'm not using my fingers, I'm using the palms of my hand. Once this is down into a sort of round shape, and it isn't wobbling around, that's when I'm going to give this some strong compression, coming from the side and working from the center of my ball of clay. And I'm just knocking it right on center by giving it a nice strong squeeze. So with plates, we started with a flat, low disc, right? So with a bowl shape, we're gonna start with almost a doorknob shape, because we're gonna be starting with a shape that's going to help us create the form that we're gonna make. So if you were making a cylinder, we'd be starting with something that was taller as opposed to wider, right? So I am going to just round this over so that it looks a little bit like a half of a grapefruit. Okay, and then I'm gonna push in here. And I'm just pushing in and creating that kind of doorknob shape. And that doorknob shape is gonna allow me to get my fingers under here once we open this ball of clay up, so I can grab the clay and come up, so I'm not having to push in and change the inside shape of the bowl. So I've got my doorknob shape. I don't know where my ruler is. Do we have a ruler kicking around anymore? Sure, pass one over. I just want to know what my width is here so that you guys can have a little sense of a... Yeah, we'll use a big T-square, no problem. Okay, yeah. All right, so that's about 4.5 inches across. All right, so I've got my ball of clay, I've got my doorknob, cleaning up my wheel, and now I'm gonna rest my hands on either side, and I'm gonna use my thumbs to find the center of the ball, and I'm gonna slowly start pushing down. I'm gonna carefully release because I got a little sticky there and I wanna put a little bit of water in there. And I'm just pressing down. I'm gonna carefully release and switch because there's only so far my thumbs can reach. So I'm gonna switch to my 2 middle fingers. You might find you wanna go down this way or one finger this way or however it feels comfortable. I'm just using my fingers here to drill directly down. And then I'm going to stop my wheel and I'm going to take a measurement. Right, so that's a little bit thicker than 1/2 inch. I don't want these bottoms to be again 1/2 inch because we'll flip them over and we'll trim out 1/4 inch so we can put glaze on the bottom. So I'm going to leave that at about that, a little bit more generous than 1/2 inch, so that when I'm opening this and compressing the floor, I'm probably going to lose a little bit of that distance, or thickness rather. Okay, so I know that I've gone down far enough. If you haven't gone down far enough, you can go ahead and go down a little bit more. Okay, so now I have my hole down the inside, and now I need to open the ball. And so on plates, we use the corner of our hand and we kind of push the clay out. Here, we're going to, again, we're making a bowl shape. So we want something with a curve on the inside, so we want to open the ball with a curve. So I'm gonna use my fingertips and I'm gonna start in the middle and I'm gonna slowly push out kind of on a 45-degree angle, waiting for that clay to come around each time. Again, if I get a spiral on the inside, I've moved my hands too quickly. Okay. On the outside, I'm going to support with my exterior hand so that I'm not really looking to change the outside shape here. So I'm going to have to push back a little bit with my hand. And I'm slowly going to open this up. If you can't see what my hands are doing on the inside, come over and have a peek. Okay, so I'm going to do this a couple of times where I'm slowly starting to stretch this form up and out. But I'm still going to allow this top edge to come up vertically, because just like plates, or any form we make, clay has a really good memory. And so if it remembers being stretched like this, it is gonna have an easier time flopping over when you're making it, or in the kiln. So right now I'm gonna compress my rim back down into the ball of clay. I'm just supporting on either side. I'm helping to keep that in center. And I'm gonna keep coming back in here. If you find it a little bit unwieldy to do this with your fingers, you could put your sponge down underneath your fingers. Right, so I could come in here like this. And I'm just slowly bringing this out. And what am I doing every single time I start at the bottom? I'm compressing, that ever important thing. I will also take a little time just to kind of hang out there. That's why I like using the sponge down there, because it sort of really allows me to compress that and start making this nice shape. Okay, I'm gonna carefully release, come back and stretch out my rim. Okay. And now, this hopefully makes a little more sense, right? And now I can fit my fingers under here and just grab this clay without having to push the clay in. But I've got a big bump of clay here, and I wanna this first pull is gonna just be evening things out. Remember, this is a form that cantilevers just like a plate, so we still do want it to taper, right? So I don't wanna take too much here, but I can get rid of some of that clay. So from the bottom, I'm gonna be lifting, and on the inside, I am just meeting my fingers, and I'm trying to use my hands on the inside to maintain that curved shape. And as I come up and feel this get a little bit thinner, I'm just sort of guiding here until I can get to the top, carefully release, compress my rim. Now this is a bit more even, right? But there's still quite a bit of clay there, so I'm again starting on the inside with my fingers in the center, slowly walking them out to meet my other hands. And now I'm gonna start making a pull, but I've gotta wait for this clay to come around. So I'm coming up very, very slowly. And then when I get right to the edge of the rim, I'm gonna release below the rim, because we are talking about wanting to have nice round rims, right? Soft edges for the application of restaurant ware, right? We don't want things that are gonna come to an edge for this work. So we want to now set up this rim. If we make it really thin, we still have to stretch this bowl out a little bit. If we make this too thin and then we stretch it, what's gonna happen when it stretches? It's gonna become thinner. So we wanna make sure that we set the shape now. So the clay behind it is actually a little bit thinner than this, because we want this nice round edge. So we're gonna have nice round compressed rims. And by setting it now, I also am I can even come in and make a motion with my thumb there. And that gives me a visual place where I'm going to stop, right? I'm gonna bring my hands up and I'm gonna stop right before this rim, okay? So we'll start right in the center. And again, I'm gonna come up, grab my hands with the clay. I'm gonna slowly compress this and bring my hands right up, right before that edge of the rim. I'm gonna carefully release, and that allows me to maintain that nice rim. Now, just because we set the rim doesn't mean it's gonna stay that way. So we have to come back every single time and readdress the rim, okay? And I'm just taking a feel. I like the thickness right here. And again, I'm gonna stretch it a little bit, so I don't wanna make it too much thinner there, because it would become too thin and then flop over. So I am gonna kind of address my pressure a little bit more down here. And I'm going to grab this clay and bring this clay up. And then I'm sort of guiding as we come up to the top. I'm going to carefully release my pressure, come back and compress my rim. And now at this point I'm going to switch to one of those round edged ribs, okay? And I can come in and I want to bend it, and you want to keep your rib on the right hand side of your wheel if you're throwing on the right hand side, and the left hand side if you're throwing with your on the left direction. So I'm going to come in, and I'm going to come in kind of at a 30-degree angle so that the clay sweeps into my hand, and I'll start right in the center, and I'll hang out there and compress that floor a little bit more. On bowls, this is the place that gets forgotten about and where we often get S-cracks, so a little extra love there can't hurt. And then I'm going to start using this rib to stretch this form out, and so I'm just coming up slowly like I did with my hands, but I'm stretching a little bit. I'm supporting on the outside so I don't do too much stretching. Come back, compress my rim, and now I can come back in and just use the shape of that rib and swoop up the sides. Okay, so that allows you to have a really nice smooth inside. Now I'm also going to take my slip off of the outside right now, because we are going to pick these up and move them. So I'm going to compress this exterior because we just stretched it out, so we need to compress the back side of the clay. I can take my sponge here and bend my rib so that it takes the shape that I'm looking for. All right, so I like that pretty well. And at this point I'm going to come in and I'm going to use the wooden knife tool to just make a little cut here, get some of that extra clay off, compress this exterior space, and continue the thrown line there. And then I can flip my tool over, flip it over again, grab this extra clay, and from trimming your plates, you know how important it is now to have a clean edge there. All right, so really work to clean that up. Now, because I've used the tool to push in, what it's done on the inside is kind of pushed and compressed the floor of my clay. So at this point, I'm gonna come, I kind of like the idea of a little edge there, a little change in shape, delineation between an architectural shift. Okay, so just use the corner of that tool. I'm gonna come back and compress my rim. Maybe I'm gonna stretch it out just a little bit so it feels a little bit more generous. And then I'm gonna come back to my center, and I'm gonna use my rib, and I'm going to just do a quick kind of stretch, light stretch on the inside. I think it's the most important place to touch your work is on the inside, is the last kind of place. It gives it this breath of air, right? So it changes the posture of the form. And so I'm just gonna come back in. It takes it from slouching to standing up straight. And I'm just taking off that slip. I'm re-stretching, thinking about what that outside shape's gonna look like. And then I'm gonna come back, and the last thing I'm gonna do before I cut it off is compress my rim. All right, you can go back and use your little piece of plastic. I don't know where mine went. Oh, there it is. Or a chamois. This is the cheap man's chamois. And in some ways I like it better. So now I can just use that to compress that little shape. Okay. I did just drip a little water in there, and I am gonna just pick that right up because you don't want water sitting in the bottom of these because it will cause it to crack. So I might come back and just fine tune this little edge right here. And stretch it out just a little bit more. Right, so now I have this nice round rim. It's got a little bit of an extension out so that it feels more generous on the inside. Got plenty of clay.